So welcome back to our Breaking Down the Adoption Barrier series presented jointly by SOAR Performance Group and Prolific. What we'll be talking about today is really the fourth installment in this series, which is all about how to drive more value from your investment in sales enablement and really move the needle in terms of seeing some ROI and payback around that investment in sales enablement. And today specifically, we're going to be talking about the third reason that new innovations and approaches aren't adopted, which is all around compatibility with past experiences. So just to resync in terms of what motivated us to, one, present about this topic at Dreamforce, and secondly, create this webinar series is some really interesting numbers that we've learned about, which is that the number of organizations with a dedicated sales enablement function has gone from 20% to 60% over the past 4 years. But in that time frame, the percentage of reps making quota, not only has it not gone up, it's actually gone down. And so we thought that was a really curious thing. And we're really interested to understand why, with all this investment, why are we not seeing a better result? And our core belief based on our work with client organizations is it's really all about adoption. So what we're going to talk about today is one of the reasons why new innovations, new approaches aren't adopted, and what are some ways you can help overcome that in your organization. So I'd like to introduce quickly myself. My name is John Thaxton. I'm the VP of Client Engagements at SOAR Performance Group, working with a variety of companies from large Global 1000 type organizations down to high growth venture-backed startups to help them drive next level performance around sales and go-to-market approaches. With me today as well is Bill Green. And Bill, if I could ask you to give a quick intro to the group or yourself and your role before we dive in.
Hi, and thanks, John. Bill Green. I'm responsible for the go-to-market team at Prolific, and Prolific is a Salesforce App Exchange partner. And our focus is sales enablement, which we're going to speak about throughout this session. I spent many years at Salesforce in my entire career in B2B tech sales, so I've had a opportunity to speak to many customers, as well as be a practitioner, a recipient of various technology initiatives. So I've got some very specific learnings and perspectives on how to really unlock the power of sales enablement as well as adoption to get maximum sales results. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. And with us today as well, who will be sharing some examples from our customers, is Charlie Thaxton, who's the president of SOAR Performance Group. Charlie, could you share a little bit of your background before we dive in?
Thanks, John. Yes, our work is working with clients as they drive key sales enablement initiatives to drive new strategies in terms of go-to-market, and look forward to sharing some of those experiences today with the group.
Thanks very much, Charlie. So just to link back to some of the things we shared earlier, there are 5 core reasons that new innovations aren't adopted that we're exploring throughout this series. The third, which is the one we're really going to dive deep on today, is compatibility with past experiences. And so when we talk about compatibility with past experiences, what this really refers to is that one of the reasons new approaches or new initiatives don't end up getting adopted is they're not compatible or they're not congruent with what someone has experienced in their past. And so we've all probably seen in our own organizations situations where something new is brought in and it's just too far removed from what people are used to, and there's really an organizational resistance to some of the new ideas, even though they might have huge value. And so what we're going to explore today through our discussions with Charlie and Bill is really around how do organizations understand what those past experiences are, and what do organizations who really drive great adoption, what do they do differently? And so, Charlie, I'm gonna start with you. So when you think about the initial topic that we shared, which is really around increasing investment in sales enablement, yet not maybe seeing that return on investment in terms of different results, how do you see this topic in terms of compatibility with past experiences preventing organizations from really getting a great ROI on their investments in sales enablement?
The thing that we have seen is that each individual and actually each person within an organization, as well as the organization in total, has a set of experiences. And so those set of experiences, both positive and negative, influence how they perceive new ideas and new proposals that are put forward. And those include topics around sales enablement. So what have they seen in the past from a training and development perspective? What have they seen in the past from a sales ops perspective? What have they seen in the past from a tools perspective? And what do they believe based on those past experiences? So I would say that probably one of the biggest barriers is someone's past experiences and the beliefs that are generated based on those past experiences that someone has to overcome. So I would say number one is taking time to understand what have those past experiences been. And as a sales enablement leader in an organization, spending the time to understand the organization, the individuals that you're supporting as your customer.
That's a really interesting point, Charlie. And I actually see this playing out in a couple different ways in some of the clients that we work with. In a lot of the really large organizations that have a long institutional memory around some of the things that Bill has shared about throughout this series around different types of methodology training, different types of things that have been deployed over a really long period of time. In a lot of ways, there's almost not recognition of some of the new possibilities that exist through one, technology, as well as advancements in really customer buying behavior. And then on the flip side, we work with a lot of really young organizations, and it's really interesting because in many ways, they almost have no institutional memory about what's been done in the past. And in a lot of ways, they miss out on some of the great best practices that have been baked into organizations for a long time. So it's interesting that you mentioned this because I think it plays out in different ways in different types of customers. And Bill, when you think about this from a technology perspective, how do you see this compatibility with past experiences? How do you see that getting in the way of adoption?
There's a lot of different directions that I can go here, but I think two come to mind. One is there's always been a huge dichotomy of the past experiences that people have had with business technology. And so I rarely find a social setting when people say to me, I've really got this awesome piece of technology that's helped me do my job better. In fact, I don't think I've ever heard that until recently. And the reason for that was that business technology often was over-engineered, complex, unreliable. I remember, commiserating with teammates back in the day when you'd have you'd put all your work in and all the data entry, and then you'd have a sync error, right? Or somebody would call through on the phone line. That's really dating myself. But whereas fast forward to today, and it's a bit of a commercial, for my former employer, Salesforce. But when they talk about trust being their number one value, right? And that's at the end user perspective, at the CIO level, and all the way through. And the trust is that it's going to be secure, it's going to be scalable, it's always on, it's going to always have innovation. And so from a technology standpoint, when you're talking about sales enablement, you really have to kind of bridge that gap of what the consumers have expected around ease of use, innovation, always on, it's secure with what you're doing in your everyday job. And that's available today, and that's part of the disruption that Salesforce and the Salesforce platform, and companies like Prolific that are built on the platform, are doing to kind of change that perception of the past.
That's a great point, Bill, and I think it's really interesting what you shared there in terms of the way that innovation from a technology perspective has really changed the game in terms of what people expect their experience to be now and how they expect it to be different from some of the things they may have experienced in the past.
Yeah, it's, people that are joining the ranks of selling professionals have much different past experiences than others that are more seasoned, for example. And so, admittedly, having been at this for a while, I've got more past experiences than somebody that's coming in now, which actually puts even more pressure on technology providers to really deliver innovation and ease of use and be intuitive, et cetera.
That's a great point, Bill. And Charlie, when you look at the customers that you work with and that our organization works with, what do you see them doing to help take this into account and make some of their sales enablement related initiatives more successful?
Yeah, the great question, John. I would say that one thing that you have to work with a client on is realizing that the world is changing, and so some of our experiences in the past won't be the same as today because the world has changed, and that world is changing is around new approaches, new processes, new technologies. And I'll just share a quick story. We worked with a leading digital imaging software company, and they were dealing with an issue about, in their market, there's a lot of pressure to prove ROI of the solutions. And in their world, they had an ROI tool for years, an Excel-based tool, and the tool had been used for years, but their perception was that it didn't work. The tool didn't work, and the process previously had been to complete the ROI tool in terms of filling in the potential areas of savings, the business benefits, and mail that off to the customer. And that wasn't working for them because the customer was not engaged. And so just through changing a process to have them engage the customer in the process and then delivering a tool that allowed them to interactively engage the customer in the process of the business case and ROI becoming the customers versus theirs, made a huge shift in terms of the results they're able to generate, and also changing the customer engagement. So a lot of times it's not about the tool and it's not about the process. It's about the combination of those together and how do you bring a different experience in customer engagement through them.
That's a great point, Charlie. And it sounds like one of the things that's really important to consider is not only what someone's past experience has been, but what are the requirements today to be successful and what's required to really succeed within your marketplace, and aligning what you do with that versus just a focus on whatever's happened in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of times the past experiences are relevant from a learning perspective, but they may not be relevant from a market perspective based on how the market has changed, the customers have evolved.
And Bill, how about from the technology side? How are you guys seeing your customers really address this in terms of making sure that what they're doing is compatible with people's past experience so they can get better uptake?
Yeah, thanks, John. So, what we see within our customers and prospects and throughout the industry is, people acknowledging what some of the pitfalls were in the past as it related to technology. Some of those pitfalls were that it was, just one group that was leading it, whether that's leadership or finance or IT or, a divisional individual that was looking for an end-all, be-all solution for everybody. So that was kind of one. And item two is that there's a lot more appreciation for how important something that's intuitive is. And what that means is that just because something doesn't have 1,000 features that could possibly address every conceivable variation of the requirement doesn't mean that it's not going to deliver huge value, right? I think, many of us appreciate we only scratch the surface as far as all the capabilities in Excel, but still it's an incredibly powerful business tool that we've all gotten value out of. So when I think about this from a technology standpoint, what we see people doing is, number one is getting started. Number two is not having it as a huge, giant, epic project, where the scope is everybody in the company. The idea is getting experience and learnings by getting started, seeing results, getting user feedback, challenging and learning from the experiences of the past, and just starting down the path of of sales enablement.
That's a great point, Bill. And it sounds like one of the ways that you're seeing your customers address this is by letting them get their fingerprints on the new approaches you're deploying with them, so that it really becomes their solution versus our solution, and that makes a huge difference in terms of it really being compatible with what they've experienced in the past.
Yeah, you bet. And as you know, when we were at Dreamforce, we probably spoke to hundreds of people in these kind of micro meetings, and light bulb moments go off, and they really understand. This is a very valuable motion in that example, account planning. I can see it; it makes sense. How do I get my hands on it to try it out for my company? Thanks,
Bill, for sharing that. So as we look forward to our next series, we're going to focus on the fourth reason innovations aren't adopted, which is opinion leaders not engaged. So we'll be spending some time focusing on why this happens, how it prevents adoption, and what are some of the things that you can do differently in your organization to make a difference here. Lastly, if you're looking to get a jump start on increasing adoption within your organization, a couple things. One is there are 5 other installments of this series, so feel free to peruse some of those to get some other good ideas. Also, if you want to connect directly with our firm, SOAR Performance Group, we'll be happy to do a free 30-minute leading practices briefing on what top sales enablement organizations do differently than core organizations. And for Prolific, Bill, what's a good way for folks to get some more exposure to you guys?
Thanks, John. You can check us out on our website, which is prolific.com. And in this case, you can get your fingerprints on it and get your eyes on it, and whether that's Prolific Crush, which is native account planning in Salesforce, or Prolific Ace, which is really digital content enablement. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Bill and Charlie, for sharing some of those real-world experiences, and we'll look forward to having you, the audience, on some of our other series coming up.
Thank you.